Hey, folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Secure IT 360, coming at you with a new episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. You've got myself, Brad, and Mr. Spencer here as well. And today we're going to kind of talk about a different angle here on some of the topics that we've covered here on the podcast. And the title of the episode is "We Couldn't Get In, and That's a Good Thing." But you're not done yet. I kind of added that last part, by the way.
I
And
like that.
so,
Yeah, it was like, or is that all, or something like that. I
right.
gotta, yeah,
Yeah, you got to add some drama to the end of it, right?
yeah,
But the premise of the episode is, let's say you had a pen test, right? And the pen tester didn't get into your environment. What does that mean for you guys, right? And I think a lot of people may go down the road of, well, then we're good. They didn't get in. And so our objective today is to tell you why that's maybe not the right approach, and some things that you can do to ensure that not only do the pen testers not get in, but the bad guys don't either, right?
yep, definitely. And one of the things I wanted to, like, when I was thinking about this kind of idea for this episode was like contrasting what stops us that, or what defenders or what clients think might actually stop attacks or stop us that actually don't or may not. And then the opposite side of it is like, what are the things that you may not think of that actually stop us, that actually do prevent us from going further, getting initial compromise, lateral movement kind of things, maybe some of the unusual things that you think, or maybe obvious things that actually do stop us, prevent us, frustrate us as attackers.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's actually something like on our debrief. So we talk about like, hey, this thing really killed us right here. Good job on that.
Yep.
And so we do like to talk about those net positives. Um, so yeah, man, I think at the end of the day, even I'm less, a clean report is one thing, right? In a lot of cases, we end up with partners or clients who had an okay report, but we didn't get in, right? I'm just talking external. We're going to cover this from an internal perspective too, I believe. But maybe we didn't get in. We didn't pop an account, but all the indicators are there, right? And so the reason that might occur is because we have what we call a best effort engagement, right? And so if you're getting an internal or an external pen test, you're getting a best effort engagement. It is a time limited engagement. We only have X number of days to get into your environment. We're going to do everything that we can, right? But at the end of the day, also getting in is not always the objective. In fact, I think if I were to break down the purpose of a pen test in a single sentence, it would simply be to identify risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to spend some of our time finding your risk, right? And then we're also going to spend some time trying to get into your environment, because a lot of times those are the same thing, but not always.
Yep.
And so, I think there's that misconception there that like, cool, man, we had kind of a rough report. There's a lot of findings there, but you guys didn't get in, right? And we're like, yeah, no, we didn't, but that's the wrong angle to
Yeah, and
be
I
thinking
think,
about.
yeah, and when I think about that too, and in the context of any kind of pen testing, it's like find risk and help the client improve. It's like in light of not being able to identify, critical vulnerabilities or high risks or things that are like really groundbreaking, or you have to stop the engagement and like let the client know and fix it. Is, in light of those things, what can we help teach the client? What can we help educate them on? Where can we help them improve? If it's not finding, a specific critical vulnerability, or the areas where they can improve that are maybe outside of that frame a little bit, that as part of the pen test we can help them with. So one example that I think of is like typo squatting, typo squatting. And we did an episode, Tyler and I did an episode on this. So if you go look for it, you'll find it. But that's something that's like seemingly innocuous. If you're a defender, you're an IT admin, you might not even know that people are registering domains that look like yours if you're not aware of this and you're not looking for it. That's something that, maybe it presents some immediate risk, maybe not. Maybe it's just a parked domain that somebody bought. Those are the kind of things that I think provide a lot of value, even though they're not super critical or super high risk. Mm-hmm. And you may think, well, that domain didn't hurt me, or there's no phishing pages created on that or anything like that. But those are the kind of things I think about right on external to kind of frame this conversation.
Yeah, and I'll take it a step further too. One of the things that we include as an informational finding in a lot of cases is the presence of like SSH or SFTP. And I mean secure FTP, right? Not FTPS. There's like a million variations, but the point is this, right? In most cases, you can't wrap MFA around that. In most cases, you have no visibility into brute force attempts, into other types of attacks that exist on that port and service. And so, yeah, it's an informational. We're just telling you about it because in a lot of cases, people don't know it's there. But the reality is the presence of these, we're going to call them legacy protocols.
Yep.
They absolutely create risk for you guys. And no, there's not a CVE, no, there's not a CVSS score associated with it. But you probably don't need SSH on the public internet, guys.
Yep.
You
And
know,
something we see too is like maybe it's SSH, but it's on a non-standard port, right? It's like, oh, it's on a weird port. Nobody will find it, right? It's like
we
putting
found
your
it.
website on 8443 instead of
Yeah,
443,
yeah,
or 4433, which is common too.
yeah.
It's like so back in my IT admin days, it's like what was that login page? What was it again? Because you can't remember, right? You log into your vSphere environment or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't think of it. So you iterate through 8443, 443, 4433, 888, the different
Yeah,
permutations of that. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it was.
yep, yeah.
But
We
yeah,
actually have a tool called HTTP probe that kind of has like the top 25 most common alternative ports for HTTP. And dude, we find all kinds of wild stuff, and half the time they're like admin portals that the client didn't even know was there,
yep.
or but yeah, so that's probably one big misconception, right? And everything we've just talked about falls into this category of, yeah, we didn't get in. um, but we're also limited, right? We only have, on an external, we're 3 to 5 days of work on you guys. And the bad guys have an unlimited amount of time and effort that they can throw at you. And given enough time, they're going to find something. And maybe given enough password spray iterations, they're going to get an account. And so now what, right? So that's kind of, a misconception. Don't let a pen test report fool you in that way.
And especially when it comes to rules of engagement, right? You talk about
Mhm.
this, from time to time, and it's like I think the analogy you used as before, and one that sticks in my mind is like, we're not going to go into the data center and clock somebody on the head with a wrench, to get in or get access to the environment, right? But threat actors, especially ransomware groups, like they attack hospitals, they attack places that are more or less, defenseless in many ways. They don't have the same ethics. They don't have ethics, right? We have
Yeah.
a certain rules of engagement, right? We're not going to denial of service you in order to prove a point, kind of thing. So there are lines that we can't cross
Yep.
that also make it seem like, oh, you didn't get in or you didn't get anything as well. That's not exactly the whole picture, right? Because of the rules of engagement and what we said we were allowed to do versus not allowed to do.
So actually, that brings up another really good point, right? There is another, along that same vein. There's another misconception that like we identify risk in your external footprint, and they're like, yeah, but did you exploit it? And we're like, bro, do you really want me to spend my entire week building proof of concept attacks against all these, 3, 4 vulnerabilities that have POCs available, or build you a POC from scratch? And sometimes we will do that, but we're not doing it on every single one, right? Once we identify that it's there, and we can prove that it's present, we're moving on. With some exceptions, So, yeah, we'll build you a stored cross-site scripting exploit and drop it on your profile and let you see how it works. But the time it takes to build something like that, you would rather pay us to find risk
Mm.
than you would, I mean, don't get me wrong, dude. If you want to pay me to write POCs, I would love to do that all day, every day, but I'm not providing you any value at that point.
Yep.
And so, that's a common thing that we get is like, yeah, but you couldn't exploit it. Like, dude, give me 2 days. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So yeah, yeah. Don't let that fool you either. You know.
Same on internals. There'll be occasionally I'll come across like a multifunction device that has a bunch of vulnerabilities on it, right? And they have known POCs available. I could spend some time kind of reverse engineering those or customizing that POC to exploit that printer or that multifunction device, right? It might take me an hour, it might take me a day, a couple days to kind of really figure out how to abuse that. And then what am I going to do after that? Like how am I going to continue the attack from that standpoint?
Yeah.
when, very many cases, there's a lot of low hanging fruit, like non-unique local admin passwords and, admins, domain admins logging into non-domain controllers. Like there's bigger issues at play than this multifunction device that you just unplug until it can get patched. Right.
Yep.
So spending your time wisely. That's one of the things, mentoring Tyler on internals is like, you have to, part of the experience and the skill set of being a pen tester is knowing what to focus your time on
Yes.
and knowing what's valuable to the client or going to be valuable to them versus just spinning your wheels and like, oh, I exploited this thing. And it's like, yeah, but what did you actually do? What value or impact did you actually provide?
Yep. You're absolutely right. And that comes with time as a pen tester. And, again, ask yourself and be honest, what would you rather me do? Because, you're paying a not small amount of money for this service. Do you want me to spend my week writing code? Or do you
Yep.
want me to find as much risk as I can so you guys can be better?
Yep.
So yeah.
Another good one is renaming the RID 500 count in an Active Directory domain. It's like the built-in domain administrator account's normally called administrator. You can rename it, but it's still RID 500. It still has the same SID, so you just go
Yeah.
look for the SID for that account.
Yep.
And to some extent, you could argue, security bag obscurity, but
Doesn't
not
work,
super
dude.
viable from an Active Directory context.
Agreed 100%. It just doesn't work, man. Yeah. That was a cool tactic in 2001.
Yeah.
We don't care anymore.
Yeah. Now, if you're building canaries off that, I actually do like that strategy from a canary standpoint, right? Like you create an admin account and then you name it something that intentionally looks like you're trying to obfuscate the name of it.
Yes.
So you get into the psyche like, oh, they're trying to rename that account and be fancy, right? But it's actually canary. It's like reverse psychology. So there's like Jedi mind tricks that you can do with that. I think are really neat.
I think we should do an episode on maximizing canaries.
Yeah.
Because you actually had a recent engagement, and we're getting way off topic, but let's roll with it. So, you had a recent engagement where you found a canary or a canary account, but you knew it was a canary account immediately. So
Yep.
do you want to talk about that really quick? I mean, I know it's off topic, but it's
yeah,
actually,
no, I think it fits into this concept of like security obscurity. It's like things we think help us be more secure, but actually maybe don't. So this was an account that had reversible encryption enabled on it. It was, named admin, whatever. It had reversible encryption enabled on that account only. But the problem was it was created, like, I don't know, in 2014 or something like that is when the account was created based on the timestamp. But then it had no login, had no recent login in Active Directory. So that's an immediate red flag to me that it's a canary or it's a honey account because it had no recent login events. I'm like, why would this admin account be here, have no login events? So we immediately thought canary. And how you can improve that is have login events. So make it look like that account has recently logged in, make it look like that account has been recently used. Maybe even add a password in the description or some indication in the description of the account that makes it look a little bit more believable. Because if you just slap an account together, call it admin123, put reversible encryption on it, but don't log in with it, it's like halfway there. So
yeah. Well, and I would say, take that further, right? And from my perspective, if I see an account that is unique in that, for example, it's the only one that has reversible encryption, like I'm already suspicious. It's the same thing with Kerberoasting, right? Like if I find one service account that is Kerberoastable, like that's weird.
Yeah.
That's suspicious, right? And so yeah, so I'm immediately like, I'm not messing with that account. I'll move on. So make sure that account melds into your other accounts from a consistency perspective. It should look, feel, smell like other accounts in that environment. Same naming convention, similar configurations. In the case that you're talking about, dude, I would spin up 12 accounts. And all of them regular users, and maybe one that's an admin, similar naming convention, similar OU, you know what I mean? Like make it believable. So, there you can go to that next level with those. But anyway, I don't want to get too far.
Yeah, so I looked it up. Episode 130, we did a podcast using deception technology to detect cyber attacks. Yep. So that's that episode. And then the typo squatting episode, if you're curious about that one, is 126.
Beautiful. Love it, man. All right. So what's another thing that you think is stopping an attack, but really just slows us down on a pen test?
As far as like what clients think may stop us, but actually doesn't, kind of thing. The
Yeah,
other one I
yeah.
wanted to mention was EDR and kind of security alerts.
Okay, cool.
Um, a lot of times on internal pen tests, we will do a whole bunch of stuff. Some stuff will get blocked, and then the client thinks they're super solid there. And then when we go to the debrief and they start asking their vendor either shares more information that they had and didn't pass it along because it was marked as like a true positive or something like that.
Hmm.
That's a tricky one, and oftentimes can be a misconception of like, did the common question is like, would you have been blocked, right? Like, would this have stopped your engagement? Would this have stopped your attack? And we try to answer that question through this engagement and say, okay, what is everything the vendor saw? Here's all the things that they alerted on, but they logged, but they didn't alert on, or no one took action on. And one of the worst things we can see is when we do a whole bunch of stuff and we believe that there should be some threat detection for it, there should be some alert for it, but no one responded to it, right? Or the
Hmm.
response wasn't adequate given the risk or the threat. So that's something that I see often is like, if somebody sees one alert and it's quarantined, they think they're good automatically, whereas it doesn't necessarily tell the whole story,
Hmm.
because that threat actor or us, we might have access to another machine, or three other machines in the environment, and it's just this one machine that kind of caught the activity. And in the case of a real threat actor, they may have persistence in multiple places. And let's say they're on the backup server, but their beachhead, or vice versa. Let's say they're on the beachhead and they're trying to pivot to the backup server, and the backup server gets triggered. An alert gets triggered there, and then gets quarantined, right? Well, they're still on the network, right?
Hmm.
And it's a false sense of security to say, oh, I blocked it, I'm good, I don't need to worry anymore, or I don't need to investigate it anymore. So that's one that we really try and stress the importance of, like, understanding the full footprint of the security alerts and the stuff that we do on a pen test, so that you know where the alerts are coming from, what that means, how to respond. There's a lot of nuances to that.
Yeah, and I think, we say it all the time, right? Context is everything. And so in your example of popping a backup server and that getting quarantined, like, okay, dude, that's deep in my network, right? That's not an
Yep.
endpoint. Not, I mean, not a user endpoint. And so my first question immediately is going to be like, where'd it come from, right? And so yeah, you're absolutely right. And we can't stress this enough, folks. Like, we talk about this all the time. I love EDR, but it is not the silver bullet that everybody wants it to be.
Yep.
And so, you need to have more telemetry than that. You need to have more visibility into your environment, because, I mean, just out of curiosity, what are the percentages on internals that you guys turn off EDR or bypass EDR?
Usually we're using like AMSI bypasses. So it's not like fully tampering with the EDR. Most of them are fairly good
Yeah.
at, just uninstalling it or completely tampering with it. Although there is like new kind of techniques where you can install an antivirus product over the top of the EDR product, and then that antivirus product will take precedence. So you can actually like create your own fake antivirus, install it over the top, and that completely neutralizes the other antivirus products.
Yep.
I
Yep.
was talking to a client about this just yesterday. I'm like, this is one of the reasons why you can't let users be local admin. If you're
Yeah.
local admin, you can install software, which means you can install an EDR over the top or an antivirus over the top, and then you're blind. And
Yep.
if that's all you've got, you're blind. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of I forgot where I was going with that.
So on these internal engagements, right? How many of these, as a percentage,
A
are you
bypassing.
guys? Yeah, whatever the right term is, right? Like,
Yep.
getting around it, let's say, and still
Yep.
moving forward with the engagement where EDR is not slowing you down too much.
Yeah, I mean we're I would say 98% of the time we're able to bypass certain controls within the EDR, like or certain security controls on the OS, like AMSI. So probably most of the time, I'd say majority of the time, we're able to bypass and use our post exploitation tools.
Yep.
That being said, there is a small percentage of like after it happens and we're running some of those post exploitation tools that we get quarantined, but that's a small percentage. And right now, most of the time, it's CrowdStrike. Like CrowdStrike is probably one of the toughest ones. CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, and DFE or MDE are like the top three that give us the most trouble. But I would say from a purely bypass perspective, we're most of the time able to bypass some protective controls or defensive controls on probably 98% of the engagements. But there are still alerts from it. So it's not a true bypass, like we completely
Right.
evaded everything kind of thing.
Yeah. So take that away, folks, right? 98% of the time we are able to continue with the engagement, meaning that, we're still running post exploitation tools. So that's a very scary number, and unless you're a gambling person, you need to have other things in place. So just to prove the point that EDR is not an end all be all,
Yep.
it's a great tool. I recommend everyone have it, but it's not perfect.
Yep.
So, all right. So I want to take the next one. This one is an absolute mission of mine now after some of the experiences that we've had recently, right? And so one of the things that we frequently find on an external penetration test is that the client has services that are outside their footprint. What does that mean, right? Externally third party hosted websites is a really, really good example, right? I don't know what the percentages is, but like 60-70% of these folks are running WordPress. And WordPress is a running joke, right? It is literally a running joke. At any given moment, your WordPress installation is vulnerable to some type of attack. In many cases, we have like started working with the client and they patched their WordPress last week, but by the time our engagement starts 3 days later, there's already vulnerabilities, right? And proof of concepts and all this other
Mhm.
stuff, right? So WordPress is a mess. Um, so there's two kinds of responses we get to that, right? So we find this WordPress site, and I'm just using that as an example. It can be anything. We find this third-party hosted site. It's got issues, all kinds of problems, cross-site scripting, all kinds of good stuff. And the client inevitably is going to ask the question, okay, yeah, but that's outside my network, right? That's not in my internal network. You can't pivot from WordPress into my environment, and my response is, how confident are you in that? Because let's talk about that, right? There are two types of risk associated with WordPress. One of them is a technical risk, right? When we're talking about like actually being able to exploit that environment and use that against you in some way. The other is reputational risk. And we do not differentiate between reputational and technical risk when we're putting these pen test reports together. And there's a reason for that. So we have had many situations where clients have had their third party websites compromised, leveraged to attack either them or other people. We have seen some really illicit stuff hosted on these sites because bad guys need a place to put their stuff, right? And
Mhm.
so, we've seen some illegal content on these websites that have been posted up. And so, if it's cool with you that somebody goes to search for your company name and the third hit from Google is pornography and it's on your website, cool, dude. But that is a serious reputational risk. You will never know how many people chose not to do business with you based on that. And then that's that. Now let's talk about the technical risk, right? The technical risk is now I'm going to build an attack that bounces off your site. I'm going to use a URL that's yours. And we actually just delivered a report, I think it was
Mhm.
yesterday, to a client
Yep.
where it was like, yo, dude, you got 37 instances of reflected cross-site scripting on that site. And his question, rightfully so, is what does that mean for us? And my answer is I can construct a URL that will drop malware on anybody that clicks on it, and the reputation of your site is going to pass through those browser filters, and it's gonna launch and execute. And as far as the perception of that person goes, your site just dropped malware on them. And so, there are a number of different types of things you can do with that, but it is a common misconception from people that just because that site isn't inside my ecosystem, that it doesn't present any risk to me. Guys, I got news for you. It absolutely does. And my favorite analogy is this. Okay. And then I'll let this topic go because I'm really passionate about it. But my favorite topic is this, right? Bank of America's website. Okay. The actual website itself does not contain any sensitive information. If you try to log in, it actually moves you to an authentication, I think an OAuth URL, and then from there you end up going to log into your online banking, and those are completely separate platforms. No one would dispute if I compromise the online banking login that it's a big deal. We all agree with that. But what if I compromise the landing page? bankofamerica.com/index.html or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
Now, all those people that have that bookmarked that go there first to click the login button are going to get whatever I inject into that website because it's vulnerable. The same truth is present. That is not a sensitive website. It's not hosted in their ecosystem. You can't log into it, can't do anything with it, but I can put a login page that's mine if it's vulnerable to certain types of attacks. Now, do you really think Bank of America is going to be like, meh, not part of my ecosystem, don't care? Heck no, man, because NBC, CNN, Fox News, they don't care about that, right? They don't care that it was a not in your ecosystem account. The headline's going to read Bank of America was hacked, right? And so keep all that stuff into consideration. And I understand not everybody is Bank of America, but your business still has a reputation and your business can still be blamed for the distribution of bad stuff. And so anyway, I could beat that thing to death, but that's my position on that. And I think any seasoned cybersecurity professional is going to agree with me on that. And most of the folks that want to argue with me just don't understand, right? And so that's our job, is to educate them.
Yep. And
So
that's what's great about the debrief meetings that we have when we deliver a report.
yeah.
That's what's great about this podcast is like when in that, the meeting with the client yesterday is like, it was really one of those pivotal moments for articulating this. And it was like a perfect example, personification of this issue. And it's like, well, you're going through and, talking about the findings. Like, well, what does that actually mean? Like, what can they do with that? And you're like, well, let me tell you. And then you explain it, very nicely. And the client's like, oh, yeah. And then he was like, so-and-so, we gotta fix this like yesterday.
Yeah. And yeah, dude, that's the right question to ask, right? This dude's asking the hard questions. And fortunately he was educated enough on how these attacks work to be like, whoa, dude, yeah, that's real.
Yep.
But we get the opposite of response from a lot of folks, and they're like, yeah, but you can't pivot into my environment. And I'm like, bro, you give me enough time. Let me build an attack, and again, do you really want to pay me, our daily rate to go build you a proof of concept and then spam all of your users with links to reflected cross-site scripting URLs on your way? Like, yeah, dude, we can do it. We can do it.
Yeah. And I think a good framework for thinking about that is like, where's my data? What processes are kind of integral to the business, like our core business processes, how we make money or how we service our customers. And if those things were to be disrupted or compromised, or they were able to be circumvented, or there was somebody able to get into the middle of that process, what would that mean to our organization, right? So data, the processes, how we make money, how we service customers, the trust and the relationship that we build with our customers. Is like your example, you go to Bank of America, you assume that you're going to log into Bank of America and everything's going to be fine. You're not assuming that your account's going to get compromised.
Yep.
So however that trust works, whatever that relationship looks like, whether you're an insurance company and you're quoting a policy for an agent, whether you're a bank, whether you are a law firm and you're, offering a portal for, other attorneys or folks to log in and like share evidence, whatever that process is high risk. Like that is the high risk thing that you need to be concerned about, along with the data, obviously, but the processes and the risk or the relationships, the trust that's built between your customers and yourselves or your businesses is a key aspect of this.
100% agree with that. One of the other things, and well, actually, you know what? Before we do that, quick admin. If you guys that are listening to this, if you've made it this far, first of all, we really appreciate you guys listening in. It would help us out a tremendous amount if you could like, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Click all whatever the buttons are at the bottom of this thing, right? However you're consuming this, it really helps us out a lot, man. And you guys have been doing that, and it has really shown, right? So we have absolutely seen an increase in those, and we appreciate it. So yeah, just a quick reminder to like, share, all that good stuff. It takes about 30 seconds, costs you nothing. It really helps us out in producing these episodes. All right. So question. We talked about all the silly things that don't stop us or that are perceived as but don't. So what are some things that are actually meaningful that the listeners can do to protect themselves from both us and real attackers, right? Because we're emulating that, right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I think one of the first things I think of externally is just inventory, right? Knowing what you have, trying to get a good sense of auditing. Like we talk about this all the time, and
All
I
the
don't think
time,
we've
man.
talked about like or used the frame blocking and tackling in a while. So I feel like
We
we need to
should.
get back to that.
Mike
But
Witt, that's a shout out to you, man.
yeah. But the blocking and tackling, it's the foundational stuff. It's like you have to really try hard to know what you have, especially externally, and you have to know when it's either there's issues with it or when it's vulnerable, right? So if you have Palo Altos or Fortinets or Avanti products that are open to the internet or MoveIts and your stuff, especially your external stuff, you have to have a good strong sense of what you have and where it is and how you can quickly patch it and kind of update it along with your exposed services and things like that. Like you mentioned SSH earlier on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. And a significant percentage of the time, folks just don't know what they have, right? Like how many times yesterday did they say, "Wow, why is that there?"
Yeah.
At least, 6, 7 times. And so, what that illustrates to me is like, hey guys, you need to know what you got, right? Asset management. And anybody that asked me this question, and we've talked about it a billion times, but like, what's the most important thing you can do? It's know what you got. Because everything else is downstream from that. And
Mhm.
that includes ports and services and that includes your websites, right?
Yep. And not waiting until the pen test to find it out, right? Ideally,
Yeah, dude.
being more proactive about it, taking the initiative to kind of like discover that stuff early on is going to be way better than finding on a pen test and then, having to, quickly spin up cycles to remediate it. You're better off finding it early on.
Yeah, dude. So having a pen test and not preparing for it or not doing all the things that lead up to a pen test would be the same thing as taking a college exam without knowing what's on it, right? And so you're never going to show up to a test unprepared, right? Why would you show up to a pen test unprepared? Meaning that it is a single point in time snapshot of your environment, which means the other 360 days of the year I have no idea what's going on in your environment, dude. That's your
Yep.
job, right? My job's to really a pen test, and we've talked about this before, is supposed to be a validation of your processes. And if we are finding major things on a pen test, it's because you are not doing the block and tackling of asset management and vulnerability management and all of those things.
Yep.
And so yeah, dude, like I think you're right. I think a lot of people think a pen test like, oh, they're gonna tell me how good I am. Like, bro, you better be confident before we show up.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, the other thing I think of when I think of a strong external posture is MFA, obviously, and MFA everywhere.
God, why are we still
Strictly
talking about MFA,
enforced
man?
on the CEO's account. Making sure that it's enforced everywhere as much as possible. We did a pen test for a university many years ago, and I think we password sprayed or brute forced a admin account or an account, right? Just a regular user account. We're able to log in through like the remote access. They had like RD web open to the internet. So we compromised a low level user account. We logged in through the RD web, got onto like a student lab network kind of thing. The lab network was unfortunately connected to the corporate network. We're able to Kerberoast. We got an admin account hash. We cracked the hash, and now we're domain admin from just a simple thing that is honestly easily avoidable. Just MFA everywhere as much as possible, everything.
Yep, absolutely, man. And that's one of the things we do on externals. I'm sure you guys have a similar process, but we pop an account. The first thing we do is MFA sweep,
Mm-hmm.
and very often we will find services that are not MFA'd. And
Yep.
and so yeah, dude, it goes back to knowing what you have. But yeah, MFA is huge, man. We shouldn't be talking about MFA in 2025. We
Yep.
really shouldn't, but we are, and we are because there are people out there who don't have it.
Yep.
So yeah,
Something else we've brought up a number of times before is web application firewalls or just something in front to block common web exploitation techniques. If
yeah,
it's
dude.
not built in your application already, just having something to block known bad stuff. It's just something to help with input validation or just some of the run of the mill stuff that's you're going to get constantly sprayed and kind of scanned for in mass on the internet. Oh, I can't hear you. I saw you go blank and then you came back. No, I can't hear you. That's weird. It showed like the mute button on your screen and then it's gone now, but I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All
Gotcha.
right, cool. No idea what happened there. But yeah, talking about WAFs, dude, like there's almost no reason to not have a WAF these days. They're incredibly inexpensive. And if you have applications that do important things, guys, put a WAF out in front of that. Even if you have good input validation, even if you're following the OWASP recommendations, there's no reason not to have that. You know, the biggest argument I hear about that is, well, it introduces latency. Go look at what latency is for a cloud-based WAF right now, because it's like zero point 0.1 milliseconds. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And you know, there are some things you cannot implement at an application level. You know, how are you going to defend against a large scale denial of service? You're not. It's gonna turn you off, dude. But you can buy protection through WAF that's very reasonably priced to offer
Mm.
those protections. And look, man, the reality is, no matter how good your developers are, no matter how thorough your secure software development lifecycle is, there's still gonna be vulnerabilities. It's still gonna happen because we're human beings and we do that. Get a WAF. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
just have one, dude. And so, you know, I can't tell you how aggravating it is when organizations just blanket deploy WAFs across their entire application portfolio, because we end up getting IP blocked.
Yep.
And now we got a VPN out of Atlanta or Chicago to go try testing, and then we get IP blocked again. It's super aggravating. But dude, it's an outstanding layer, not a complete solution, but it is
Mm.
a layer in an overall external defense
Yep.
strategy. So yeah,
I'll mention a couple other things before we wrap up of, what actually stops us. For me internally, non-unique or unique local admin passwords, right? So
labs.
using something like Labs, big control. It's not on my notes, but application control or some sort of app whitelisting or allow listing, especially if you can restrict PowerShell, CMD, some of the typical LOL bins or living off the land binaries that are common that threat actors use, is a very big win. It can very much disrupt attacks. Cleaning your or auditing your shares for credentials, right? And making sure
It's
that
so easy, man.
it's easy and it's hard at the same time. I was helping a client, they had, I think I found like 300 credential files. It's like,
Wow.
at that level, a lot of those, might be in use. They might be web configs that are being referenced in an application somewhere. And a lot of times it can be difficult, but it's usually not difficult to find them,
That's what I should have
right?
said. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Remediation's a different problem.
yeah, it's like just search for pass W on your file shares or web config and like look for these.
Yeah.
And obviously it takes time to clean those up, but doing that on a regular basis is something that will definitely harden your environment. And then the last thing is just Active Directory hygiene, ADCS hygiene. Since the certificate services kind of abuses became public a few years ago, we have seen just almost every environment that has certificate services be vulnerable to one of the, I think there's 16 now different escalation attacks in ADCS. So,
How hard is that to identify and remediate? Just out of curiosity.
identification, again, super easy. There's a tool called Locksmith that I really like and recommend. I've contributed to the project before. Jake is a friend of mine who created the tool. It's a super amazing, awesome tool. It doesn't do exploitation. It just requires RSAT tools, and it's just you install module Locksmith, and then you can run it. So Locksmith is really great for identification. It has remediation snippets within that tool that you can actually use to quickly remediate things if you want to. The remediation usually isn't that difficult. The hard part is like figuring out where that certificate is used and how it's used. If it uses a SAN, so if you can supply an arbitrary SAN on the certificate template, you got to know if that's needed or not. So there's some stuff you got to do to dig up vendor documentation and stuff, but usually it's pretty straightforward to remediate those things.
Nice. Yeah, man. It's a big win. You know, there is a huge amount of things that you guys can be doing. You know, these little things, right? Just ensuring that MFA is being enforced. Get a WAF. You know, like you're talking about, audit Active Directory. The tools are open source, man. They're out there. You guys can be using this stuff. Now, I'm not advocating you just go run tools off GitHub. Be smart, but at the same time, there's not really a valid reason not to be doing some of these things.
Yep.
You know. All right. Anything before we wrap up?
No, that's it. I mean, we could go on and on, I think,
Yeah.
with stuff that stops us. But I think the takeaway for me is uh, don't get caught off guard with, a clean report or not a lot of findings on a pen test report. Make sure that you're not kind of overestimating yourself and your environment and your security. Always have a little bit of kind of skepticism. Is like, did we see everything? Did the pen tester find everything? Like, what are we missing? That's what I think about in security. Is like, we know a certain amount, right? Like, here's all the findings. These are the facts. What do we don't know? What are
Yeah.
the things we're not seeing? So if you can think about some of the questions to ask, I think
Hmm.
that can be a good way to kind of uncover some of the things that you might not be thinking about, or
Yep.
edge cases or unique things that maybe weren't identified during a pen test or things like that.
Yeah. And one of the questions we don't hear enough is, what can we do better? Like, not just talking about fixing vulnerabilities, right? Not fixing findings, but what do you guys, and I'm talk to your pen tester, man. They know,
Yep.
they see this stuff all the time. So, I would like to be asked more often, like, hey, above and beyond this, what can we be doing to be better?
Yep.
Right. And I think that's a fair question to ask a pen tester.
Yeah. Instead of how do we stack up against our competitors, ask what can we do better?
Exactly. That's a beautiful approach. All right, folks, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. And if you enjoyed it, please distribute this amongst your friends and spread the word. And we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. So we'll see you guys next week.